first question I had was, reflecting on your career as both an academic and a practitioner in services marketing, which factors motivated you to carry out research within the field?
I mean, very simply, look, I was a banker. Actually, my first degree was in finance and accounting. And I was a banker, so I took all the German banking exams, actually. But when I went to graduate school, I just got mesmerized by services marketing and marketing, simply because, I mean, my Ph.D. supervisor at that time was John Bateson at London Business School. And he said, Jochen, listen, marketing starts where accounting stops. Right? In accounting, we're looking at the numbers that were generated about stuff we did in the past. But in marketing, what we do is we create tomorrow's markets, tomorrow's products, tomorrow's solutions, tomorrow's revenues. And so I was all geared up and excited about, let's create the future and go into marketing. And why services? I mean, simply because I was in banking, financial services before. I did a lot of consulting in the telecom space, pay TV, satellite TV at that time, broadband, and so on, later on mobile. And services marketing as a field, I mean, I don't mind you this, when I did my PhD is 30 years ago. It was really in its infancy. And I mean, look, I'm writing textbooks. I do every 5 to 6 years a new edition. And I'm just always blown away what progress the field makes every 5 years. Because each time when I write a new edition, I look what was published over the last 5 years. And it's just mind blowing. I mean, we take it for granted today, but you look at AI, chatbots, virtual agents and all of this wasn't that common 6 years ago. And now it's really mainstream. Platform business models, peer-to-peer sharing, all have become mainstream. So, I mean, when I started, it was really in its infancy, and it was new, and I was very excited about it. And even today, I would argue, hey, look, FMCG, durables, that's all nice and fine, but that's really very, very mature. Yes, even for goods, we're talking about network cars. So we are adding services, connectivity, value added to all the hard goods or products we have here. And then it's really the principles from services marketing, service management that kick in. So we are living in a world of service. It's already in the whole world is over 67% of GDP and jobs are in the services sector. Manufacturing is shrinking. So it's the future, and there's still so much more work to do. I mean, we don't know yet AI, robotics, and so on. We're at the beginning of that revolution. We do not have too many autonomous delivery vans zooming around, and autonomous cars and drones, and restaurants still have people, and so on. And hair salons still have people. That may all be cut back or go away in the next 10 years. And they're all, I mean, there's service management, operations, marketing issues for all of that. So, I mean, I think it's the future is an exciting field. There's still a lot of research to be done. On the other hand, practitioners in general, I find they are much more familiar with brand marketing, goods, product marketing, FMCG, and so on. But not that much on services. I work with a lot of companies, and I think they're quite behind the curve in terms of implementing the cutting edge research we generate in the field.
Brilliant. That's a very good point, Professor. It leads on to my next question when you talk about companies. Based on your past efforts with Singapore Airlines, what steps were you able to advise and implement in order to uplift the service standards of the organization?
Yeah. I mean, I would put it the other way around. What did I learn from Singapore Airlines? They're a pretty cutting edge airline. I mean, I was working with them for over 10 years in their management development center, so training their future executives and management on services marketing, services management principles here. But I learned a lot from them. I wrote 2 books on Singapore Airlines. I wrote actually 2 Harvard Business Review features on Singapore Airlines. I've done a lot of research also on innovation and service innovation. And even the work I did on cost-effective service excellence, which shows that you can be a quality leader in your industry, one of the best in your industry, as well as one of the most productive or lowest cost providers in industry. And that was really triggered, this whole research was triggered by Singapore Airlines, because we wanted to study how does Singapore Airlines achieve to be maybe not the best, but one of the top airlines for 3 decades when I started this research. Today, they're for 4 decades. We can always argue, are they number 1, number 2, or number 3? But they're definitely there at the top as one of the top airlines. And so we wanted to study how do you deliver sustained excellence, but what we came away with, which really blew our mind, was that they had the lowest cost per seat mile, per passenger mile of all full service airlines in the world. And it was just, wow, how do you do this? You're up here in quality and you're down here in cost. I mean, how do you do this? And this triggered this whole research, which I published in JAMS and a few other papers and chapters here on cost-effective service excellence and the lessons we distilled from Singapore Airlines, which we then also found in other businesses. Like Amazon is the same. One of the stingiest companies in the world. Jeff Bezos is known to be extremely careful with money, but at the same time intensely customer-centric and customer-focused. I mean, in India, I studied with Narayana Health, Dr. Devi Shetty and this health factories, if you will. So we looked at many other companies. We always looked at them, objectively speaking, are they one of the best in terms of outcome? So whether it's a national customer satisfaction survey or consumer reports or Star Treks for airlines or some objective measure on excellence. And then we looked at some hard data on productivity, if that's sales per full-time equivalent employee or cost per seat mile, or we had one library in our sample, so it was sort of members per full-time equivalent, borrowings per full-time equivalent, so whatever you use, right? So are you on the top of the game in productivity in your industry? And Singapore Airlines triggered that research, and what I learned from them was this approach we today call dual culture. And this is sort of, in the management literature, you have this whole concept of ambidexterity, and they mastered this to the extreme. I mean, I always say they're almost schizophrenic, because they say anything that touches the customer has to ooze Singapore Airlines quality. But anything not seen by the customer, cut cost, cut cost, cut cost. Cheaper, cheaper, cheapest, So, I mean, a lot of things I learned from Singapore Airlines. Overall, I must say, this may be very Singaporean, maybe I can say this, I'm not a Singaporean, right? But Singapore is incredibly disciplined, and Singapore Airlines is sort of the pinnacle of this. The whole company is extremely disciplined in terms of their customer centricity, customer focus, and at the same time watching cost, watching productivity. And the same goes with their really detailed focus on the passenger experience and the in-flight products they develop and innovate and put on board. They are always looking at how can I improve it? This cannot be good enough. This cannot be it. There has to be something that is better. So I think this hunting for improvements and doing this in a very disciplined way is what really impressed me from Singapore Airlines. Yeah. So, I mean, look, academics always learn from others. It's not so much, I think, that academics teach so many things to others, but academics are very good to recognize if there's a nugget somewhere. So somebody did something that is, well, that is special. And then you go and investigate this and write about it. And then, of course, you hope that other companies and organizations also can learn from it, that you build some theory to help you explain this. And I said Singapore Airlines was the origin of my entire research stream on cost-effective service excellence, where we now have 3 strategic pathways. And one of them is dual culture, which Singapore Airlines does. The second is what we call the focused service factory, which is what Narayana Health does, right? And the third one is what we call an operations management perspective. And you're using operations management tools to drive productivity, mostly by designing uncertainty out of processes and then using systems and technology to sort of standardize quality and cut costs. and Amazon and Google and so on are the champions of that strategy.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much for those insights, Professor. We'll move on to a different industry now. Speaking of hospitality, hospitality has seen a significant downfall due to the impact of the pandemic across the world. What insights do you perceive for hospitality moving forward, and how do you think a keen focus on service excellence will play a role here?
I mean, what COVID did, it bankrupted a lot of players. So a lot of marginal businesses are out. Those who are still in business are quite resilient and had to make heart-wrenching decisions and changes to their business models and so on. I think there are always these memes on social media says, oh, who was the change agent for technology implementation, the CEO or the CTO? And no, it's COVID, right? so COVID forced us to cut the human touch, and the volume sometimes was so high, whether it was call centers and so on, that we had to work through improving websites, improving apps, improving chatbots, digital agents to deliver stuff on scale, because we just don't have the headcount and we don't have the budget. So I think the whole hospitality sector was very much behind the curve in terms of technology before COVID, and has now done a huge catch up, and that will stay. And I mean, my prediction, at least, whether it's airline or hotels and so on, is that future investments will be a bit more careful. So people will be more careful to put capacity online, which then means they get better pricing power. So my hunch is that margins in hospitality in general will be better, and not at least also to cover for the risk. I mean, we may get another type of COVID or pandemic, we don't know. So you have to have a bit of buffer, and you have to make the money when times are good. So I think airlines and hotels and even restaurants, they all increase prices. And they will not go back to this cutthroat pricing that was sort of common before. So I think more technology, more focus on the core business model and how sustainable it is in terms of profit generation. Of course, the other key trend, sustainability overall, but that's not even COVID related, that comes everywhere. And then better pricing power through better positioning and better discipline, and I think lower investment in expanding capacity fast after COVID. I think everyone licks their wounds and wants to recover, and you don't do this by spending tons of money now.
Sure, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, reflecting on your experience in service revolutions and as a long-standing motivator of service revolutions, how important do you see the aspect of public sector organizations undergoing service revolutions in order to improve themselves?
Yeah, I mean, public sector is interesting because most of the stuff public sector does is what we call information processing type services. They typically do not shift physical goods. So it's all information. It's all about compliance and checking and permissions and record keeping and so on. And that all can be done digitally. That all can be done with AI and smart technology. So e-government is really the name of the game. And a few countries like Canada, New Zealand, Singapore are really ahead of the game here. And it's very sad to say in countries, I mean, let's say Germany, for example, is a bit lagging on e-government, and so are many other countries. The sad thing is not the civil servants that suffer, it is the populace they serve. Because if your industry and your people need to spend a lot of time, effort, and money to deal with permissions and licensing and public processes, that all zaps away productivity from the overall economy. And I think, it's no coincidence that smaller countries in terms of population, such as New Zealand, Canada, Singapore, even Australia, are more efficient simply because their civil service has to deliver the same almost as in big countries, but because the population is small, they have to be more thrifty. Now, you can't eat up an ever larger pie of GDP for public sector service and service workers. So I think the It's the smaller countries that probably, in the more enlightened countries here, that lead the way. But then, I mean, these countries usually do not develop that technology in-house, but then there's the big providers like IBM and Infosys and so on, who are developing and implementing those solutions. So they do this in a country like New Zealand, then they knock on the door of the next country. Hey, look, we have done this here. Can we help you? You know, and then it's more a matter of political will. Does the country want to do this? Yes, and I think the pressure is there. I mean, in any country, if you see that banks, insurance companies, telcos offer frictionless, seamless service, they will ask, so how come you, dear public passport issuing, driving license issuing unit, how come you're so backward and you deal with fax and tons of paper and non-digital? So I think the tolerance of the population will also be lower and pushing. So there's a pull, I guess there will be a pull and push factor to push more into e-government, and they're a huge possibility.
Absolutely. Right. Brilliant. Now, in terms of your work with artificial intelligence, the service industry also has, been influenced by this. And how do you feel technology has helped organizations to maintain the strong understanding of the needs and wants of the customer through the use of artificial intelligence?
I'm not too sure it really helped organizations to understand better. I mean, the potential is clear if it's clearly there. So if it's about understanding, of course, we do sentiment analysis, social network data mining, and all of those things. They're reasonably cost effective because there are solutions out there that are almost automated. There are many providers too. Let's say you talk about hotels. There are companies that offer you, let's say after every checkout, you get an email with a survey here, and these are things that are completely scalable. They're very cheap to do. You have to only be careful you don't over survey your customers, ideally. Yeah? So you shouldn't do this with every transaction. People get fed up and don't answer anymore. But I think that although technology offers you to do a lot more with a lot less. But the other thing is too, I mean, we want to automate stuff. Before you automate, you have to understand what you're automating. And so therefore, you're almost forced to going back to what are the customer needs, expectations, or what do we want to do here? And I mean, it's interesting for me on the AI side here. Look, you may be a 5-star restaurant, yeah, Michelin star restaurant, for example. And so it's all about the ambiance, the service, the quality of food. We say, what does robotics and AI have to do with me? You'd be surprised because as a customer, I'm so happy if you have a great app or website where I can make a reservation, where I can specify food preferences, allergies, God knows what, where I can maybe say something, look, there's a birthday celebration, we would like da-da-da-da, and so on. So, I mean, there are many other, what I call processes involved or wrapped around the core, from getting information about what are your opening hours, da-da-da-da, where do I park, and so on, to afterwards payment, and maybe even look at the food, the reviews, and so there are many other value-added things you can wrap around that can be completely automated. That means you can provide them in a scalable way without spending tons of money on people, having people on the telephone taking reservations, and so on. So I think the name of the game is really to deliver human touch where it really adds value, and to automate where actually customers may even prefer automation. I mean, think about it. Do you really want to call a restaurant and wait until the caller picks up the phone and then you tell what you want? You're not even sure whether they spelled your name correctly, whether they got the time correctly, whether they got, whereas if you can enter it yourself on a website, I can see the reservation is there. It's for 5 people. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. And it's a birthday celebration. And I can see it myself. So in terms of perceived control, convenience, it's a far superior solution than the old, more expensive telephone solution.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, moving on in that aspect as well, the use of non-human interactions, as you mentioned, the use of robots, for example, has seen this gradual rise in the hospitality industry. And in your opinion, Professor, how has this really helped to manage customers' expectations of your institution?
I mean, the thing is, customers, let's say if you do an app where you make a reservation, where you change a reservation, where you cancel a reservation, where you make payment, these are very generic processes. And as a customer, to make a booking or to change or cancel something, I mean, my hospital has this, my restaurant has this, my car mechanic has this, so they all have the same. So if you so I have a script for how to make a booking or a reservation on an app. And as long as you follow the script and make it as convenient, easy, seamless as it should be, people are going to be happy. So I think we are not anymore looking at, oh, what does a reservation process for a restaurant look like? But no, you look at what is a best practice reservation process in the world, and how do you then adapt or integrate restaurant-specific things like table size and I don't know what, right, into it. So I think expectations in technology delivered services will be more narrow in terms of scripts. So the tolerance of customers, you deviating from those scripts in a negative way, may be very limited.
Definitely. All right. Thank you, Professor. Now, moving on to a different aspect of, frontline employees operating. Most frontline employees operating within service industries are often expected to comply with set standards by organizations. In your opinion, what strategies would you advise for organizations that consist of employees often experiencing emotional dissonance and burnout due to not being able to comply with this?
Well, that's very important. And I would say, look, if you put, we call this conflict, right? This is a role conflict here, that the organization pushes certain standards and customers push back and your employee is in the middle. And I always say, if you have something like this, you as an organization shouldn't do that. You did something wrong here. You should not put your frontline into a position where they have to deal with those conflicts. I can give you a very simple example here. I don't know Sri Lanka, but I think it will be similar. In Singapore, it's very common, even high-end restaurants, you can ask for ice water, which typically is given for free. Sometimes they charge you 50 cents or $1 and you can refill it as much as you want, right? But usually it's for free. And I won't mention names here, but a famous large burger chain, a global chain, introduced, they abolished the ice water. And why? They wanted customers to buy their mineral bottle, the bottled water, which was $1. So it's not expensive, right? But because it's so against customer scripts and expectations here, customers are very unhappy. You say, I know what you want to do. You want to make me extra money. How come you so stingy, right? How can this be? And there was so much pressure that this company then said, okay, how can we still do this? And they sort of sidestepped the whole thing. If you ask for free ice water, they give you a tiny cup of water. It's like enough to rinse your mouth. So they sidestepped this. If you are thirsty, you still have to buy the bottle, but the staff doesn't have to say no to you. And you can also refill that cup as often as you want, but you just don't get a lot of water each time, right? So I would say, if you find there is conflict, number one, try and design it out from the front line. So if you have processes, policies, and products that cause a lot of heartache at the customer interface, see, can I redesign them in a way that the conflict goes away? Often it is about just offering alternatives to customers, like I give you the small cup for free, but you want a lot, you have to pay for it. Yeah. If you cannot design it out, let's say, for example, you cannot cash a check without me checking your ID for money laundering regulation. As a bank, I can lose my license if I don't have the know your customer here, especially if it involves, I think, amounts above $10,000 US. So if that is the case, then you have to train your frontline. Number one, how do you communicate this? Number two, also your frontline has to understand why this is so important, because we could lose our license, we could be fined a lot of money if we did this here. And then you train, so you get buy-in from your frontline. They understand why this is critical, and then you train them. How do you communicate the same message to the customer? And which customer will argue with their local or with their national monetary authority on banking regulation and money laundering regulation and so on. So I mean, the minute you find that your frontline is faced with such conflicts, think about how do I redesign processes, policies, products that the conflict goes away or is mitigated at least. If I can't do that, you must have a very good explanation on why this conflict cannot be changed, why this is absolutely necessary. And then you have to train your staff on communicating that to customers.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. Last question here. Based on a review of the services industry at the present stage, what trends do you forecast moving into the future, and how will service-based organizations be able to adapt to these trends?
I mean, the biggest trend is really is like what we had in the Industrial Revolution. We moved from handcrafted goods to mass manufactured, very low cost quality goods. And it brought a burst of productivity gain and wealth and well-being for the whole world. The Agricultural Revolution did the same for food. So we now actually have to work very few hours, or most parts of the world, you have to work very few hours to buy the food you need, to buy the clothing and goods you need. What's happening now is we're getting the same thing for the service economy, where there's an insatiable demand for healthcare, for education, for entertainment, right? For hospitality. There's huge amount there, but it's just at the moment, because it's so much people delivered, it is expensive or unaffordable also for many parts in the world. So we are at the dawn of, so the dusk of the start of the service revolution, yes, and it will bring the same scalable, low-cost, high-quality services to this world as the previous two revolutions did. Now, what does this mean for firms is, of course, what happened in manufacturing and in agriculture. All the small businesses went out of business, right? It was massive consolidation because, let's say, if I run a restaurant, if there's so much technology involved in a restaurant, from bots for making the reservations, from automated kitchen equipment, automated I mean, there's so much technology and stuff in there that you really benefit from scale. Scale in terms of procurement, scale in terms of deployment, scale in terms of maintenance, and so on and so forth, right? So we have this already with franchising and fast food and restaurants, because again, already they have technology and processes and training and marketing and accounting and financials and God knows what, right? So as an individual, you don't want to deal with all of this, so you franchise and buy the systems. And the service revolution will turbocharge that. So we will get more and more national, regional, global providers of these solutions here, whether it's restaurant solutions, retail solutions, whether it is even hair salons. I mean, most guys in 10 years, we will go into a hair salon, there will be a smart mirror that robot will analyze our hair and then project on a smart mirror what the robot could do with our hair. You click what you like, and then you click go, and then the robot will cut your hair, you know? But you can see that it's not anymore the game of the mom and pop shop owners. They may be franchisees, but there's going to be part of a larger chain. So we need scale for a lot of this technology to be deployed, and that means there will be massive consolidation. So there are going to be huge advantages and push. And you see this in .com, right? I mean, why is it that the Olas, the Uber, the Didi, the Airbnb, they immediately go for scale? Yes, in the .com world, in the virtual world, they go for scale, but more and more this scale and global, or at least very international approach will come to virtually all service and hospitality operators for the same reasons. Yeah, and that will bring down prices and give you consistent high quality.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
we have exciting times ahead.
Yes, indeed.